Hi guys, today we're going to go over 5 ways to bevel in Blender. Now these are more techniques of beveling, but one thing you'll see is as we go from example 1 to 5, we're really going to transition from a high poly asset to a low poly asset. And really what that means is that we're going to go from modeling bevels to then when we get to example 5, it's really more about creating the illusion of a bevel. So with that being said, let's get started. So with this first example, we're going to do Subd modeling. And you'll see here with Subd, it's really about, like, let's say this edge and then these edges on the inside here. Let's say we wanted to bevel those edges. Really, all it comes down to, so if I add a Subd modifier, and when I go into edit mode too, one thing to quickly note is that I do have a mirror modifier on this object. That way, what I do to this one corner here, it's going to apply it to all sides of the model. It just means less work. So, but if we go into edit mode here, so this edge right now, because we don't have support edges here, if I hit Control 1 in object mode and smooth this, you can see, the main form really breaks down. And the reason why is because we don't have those support edges. So we're going to go ahead and add those in. So if I go into edit mode and I hit Control R, and then I bring this edge up, the closer I get to that edge, you can see the more it holds that original form that we had. And then if I do Control R and add a support edge on the other side of that edge, you can see now it's really holding that form, and we're getting more of that bevel effect here. Now, under the subdivision modifier here, if I up the resolution of this to 2, you can see we get a smoother result. And then for the edges on the inside here, let's go ahead and do the same thing where we'll add our support edges. And for these ones, I'll get a little closer to the original edge just so that we have a tighter bevel. Okay. There we go. And now one thing, you can still see the some of the mesh here. A couple ways to take care of this is you could either up the levels in the viewport, but once it gets to a certain point, it's really hard to see with the naked eye this resolution. So at this point, you could really just go up here to Object and Shade Smooth, and then, you would have to get really close to this surface to be able to see any of the geometry making up this shape. So that's Subd modeling. The next bevel is modeling in fillets. So if we go to the first bevel example here, the resolution of this object is pretty high. So if I go to geometry and wireframe here, and I turn on the wireframe and then I turn off optimal display in the modifier tab, you can see this is actually the geometry now that's making up this object. Now, if this asset is for a film or something, this is completely fine, but a lot of the times if you're creating an asset for a game engine, or let's say you're even, just concepting, a lot of times you don't want to deal with a lot of resolution like this. And that's where the rest of these techniques kind of come into play. So this is more like an optimized versions where we're kind of faking the model to make it look like it's higher resolution than it really is. So with Bevel 2, really the goal of this is we're going to add fillets, which means that with the bevel here, we're actually going to try to just along these edges where we want the bevel, we're going to model in more of like a rounded bevel. So let's see what that looks like. I'll select this edge here, and if I hit Control B and then I pull this bevel out, and then I'm going to left click, and now I get my options for this bevel. If I start adding segments here, you can see we're adding resolution on this bevel that we just added. So let's go with something like 6. And then we'll go back into object mode. So you can see here, instead of having all of this resolution like we have on the Subd modifier, you know, we're just creating resolution where we absolutely need it to create the effect of that bevel. And then we can go ahead and bevel the inside edges as well. And I'll select both of these at the same time and Control B and bevel something like this. So again, we'll model a tighter bevel for these inside edges. And then let's go ahead and turn off the wireframe display. Now here's this model that we just created. And again, just like we did with the Subd version, we'll go to Object, we'll shade smooth, and then we'll go down here to the Object Data Properties tab. And then under Normals, I'll turn on Auto Smooth. So for the Bevel 3 example, so for this one, we're relying on smooth shading and support edges. Now what that means is, so just like we did with the Subd object, where we have our support edges around the edges that we want to bevel, it's really the same you know, method for adding bevels to this object. We're not going to use a subdivision modifier after. We're actually going to keep these sharp edges, and then with the normals, it's going to just make it feel like it's a subdivided object. But you will see as we zoom in that these edges will still hold this sharp profile. So that's the only downside, but the plus of a method like this is that it's, you know, especially from a distance like this, you're going to get a model that feels like a Subd model, but with much lower resolution on the actual mesh. So let's see what that looks like. If we go to Object and if we shade smooth, so right now Blender's trying to smooth all of the faces of this object, and that's why the shading looks really, you know, kind of funny. But again, like with the Subd model, if we come in here and we start adding support edges, you can see now the normals are being shaded flat along this surface like they should be. And then as we get towards the edge here where we want to bevel, you can see that the normals are trying to then smooth this still, and it feels almost like a rounded edge, even though we know it's not. It's still this sharp edge like we have here. So now if we insert a support edge on the other side, you know, now we're getting something that feels like a beveled edge, but if we look closely, it's still, you know, it's still actually a sharp edge. But when you get out to a distance like this, it's really hard to tell a difference between these two objects, and that's one of the many benefits of modeling this way. The other one is you just, you know, it can be faster because you just have a lot less resolution that you're dealing with. On top of that, you know, for the purposes of this video, I'm adding all these edges manually, but you could add a bevel modifier to this object. And then let's say, you know, you come in here and you start extruding some of these faces. The bevel modifier will add bevels wherever, you know, you have sharp edges like this, which is really a plus of this workflow too. It'll adapt to the model that you're building. Okay, so let's go ahead and we'll add support edges on the inside again here too. And again, just like with the Subd model, you know, the closer these are to that original edge, the tighter that bevel will look. And there we go. Okay, for the fourth bevel, we're going to create chamfers and then add a weighted normal modifier. Now the really cool thing about this one that you'll see is we kind of will get the same effect of the smooth shading and support edges example, except we'll actually have an edge here that isn't this, you know, sharp edge. It'll kind of feel a little more like a true bevel. So let's go ahead and we'll select. Well, let's just select the outer edge first. Okay, and Control B to bevel. And if also when you hit Control B, if you start scrolling your mouse wheel, you can add resolution to the bevel. But I'm going to scroll all the way back so that we just have a chamfered edge here. And then we'll add smaller chamfered edges here. Okay. And now for this to work, we just have to go to Object. Again, we're going to shade smooth. We have to turn on Auto Smooth down here. And then if we go to the Modifiers tab, all we have to do is add a weighted normal. Now you can see here's the effect we get. And again, like I was saying with the edge, you know, with this previous example here with the support edges, we have this sharp edge. But if we zoom into here, because we have that chamfered edge, we at least don't have that sharp edge profile right here. So again, these are both great ways to model game assets. You'll see this a lot. Now the fifth example, so this is using a bevel shader. Now the one downside to this is that in Blender it's only going to work in cycles. But the plus of modeling this way is that in terms of the resolution of your model, we don't need to add any additional geometry to this. This is enough to work with. So for this to work, what we're going to do is you have to select the edge or the edges that you want to add the bevel to, and then there's a node in cycles that will then apply a bevel to that edge. Again, it's completely faking it. It's all based on a shader. And if I actually pull this out, I can show you. So let's say you have, you know, your shader that you're building for this. All you'd have to do is go to Add, Input, Bevel, and then you plug this bevel normal into the normal of your principled BSDF. But we're actually going to use an add-on for this example. So let's open up the M panel, and it's this Zen Barbecue. I'll put a link to the add-on in the video description. The one great thing about this add-on is that it's the same concept as using that bevel node, except it allows you to apply different bevel widths to edges of your model. So if you don't want, you know, every edge to be the same bevel width, then this is the add-on that you need. So I'll switch to cycles real quick, because again, if we're not in cycles, we won't be able to see this effect. Now, if I select this edge right here, and let's go with a value like 3 for this edge, and then for these inside edges, we'll stick with the theme of, you know, doing a tighter bevel for those inside edges. All we have to do with the the 3 slot here, if I have this edge selected and then I hit this dot, it's going to mark that edge with that bevel width. So again, it's really nice because you're getting an effect similar to that third bevel option, the one with the smooth shading support edges, but we don't have any additional geometry on this. It's all being faked. And then again, for these inside edges, we'll just set them to 1. So you can see we have a tighter bevel on the inside edges and a bigger bevel on this outside edge. And the really amazing thing about all these techniques is that even though we built them completely differently from each other, you know, especially from a distance like this, it's really hard to tell, you know, which one is being subdied, which one's using fillets, which one is chamfered, and which one's even using that bevel shader. So guys, if you like this video, if you found the information in it to be useful, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel. And until next time, thank you so much for watching, and take care.